If you can and you're willing to support us, please do so. We'd really appreciate it. We're trying to expand the platform, trying to pay these bills. You can go to dgutspodcast.com. That's Don't Give Up the Ship apparel, some naval pride and heritage gear you'll actually wear in public. Get shirts, hoodies, shower shoes, drawstring bags, all kinds of cool stuff. Dope stickers like these. You can get logo stickers. We got the Enlisted Deviant stuff, all kinds of cool stuff. More to come. Working on lots of designs all the time. We also have the podcast challenge coin, just came out. I'm really proud of that. And then if you also are willing to and able to, please go to patreon.com/dgutspodcast. A lot of really cool benefits, tiers, all kinds of cool stuff to try to drive support for the financial side of the platform. There's demands on all of the things that I want to do to expand, cost money, all the services and subscriptions and all those things. And I am trying to turn this thing into a business and a job so that I can do that and devote all my time to providing more content, services, whatever I can do that helps you out. So if you're willing and able, please go to dgutspodcast.com. You can also go to patreon.com/dgutspodcast and become a member today. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Don't Give Up the Ship podcast, episode 110. Today, I'm talking to now retired, he's been retired for a hot minute, Command Master Chief Dave Dearie. He is the founder and one of the overlords of the what's called the Enlisted Leadership Foundation. I've mentioned it on a few podcasts, and then a listener, shout out to Victoria, was kind enough to link me up with Dave, and we were able to record a podcast, and it was super fun. But it's cool because he's kind of, he's like an earlier version of me. Like, he was looking for a way to solve what he perceived to be a leadership development and education problem in the Navy. And around, I believe it was 2007, I recorded this podcast like a month ago. So, hopefully I don't butcher any of the details, but, it was before the holidays, but he went about creating a really cool nonprofit organization where they're based out of the San Diego area, right? And they run a bunch of courses where they're leadership development courses, the Foundry and the LPO Academy, and then they were doing a Heritage Academy, and we talked about that a little bit, but they are doing what I like, kind of the brick and mortar version of what I do in a really cool and meaningful way. And I plan to try to get out there at some point and be a mentor in one of those classes, but because I want to experience it firsthand as well, so that I can talk about that. But yeah, I admire what he's had been able to accomplish. Very similar motivations for my doing the podcast, but I think he's got a lot done considering like kind of where he started. And I think what he had in his head, I mean, they're a pretty robust organization nowadays with a lot of heavy hitters, contributing to what I, have been told for a long time is really meaningful, robust leadership development education. So it was really encouraging kind of hearing about it, but then getting to talk to Dave about it. I'm even more excited about it. So if you're in the San Diego area and you haven't gone, what are you doing with your life? But if you're not, he talks a little bit about, like, you can get your command to fund the TAD orders, and he talks a little bit about that. Like, you can get there otherwise without paying for the whole thing out of pocket. But I highly encourage you to look into that, to correspond with them, and to try to get into one of the classes. And they're doing a bunch of stuff online now too, so where you can do it via Zoom. Not quite the same thing, but it's something, and you're going to get meaningful development from it. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed this as much as I did doing it. It was very fun, and check it out. But yeah, man. So just like we said, I like to start with a bio just to give the listeners a good context on who I'm talking to, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah.
So go ahead. You can go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on the show, brother. Appreciate you. A little bit about me. So, man, I joined the Navy the day after Christmas of 1984.
Good Lord, I was 1 year old.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah,
you're welcome.
Well, so I'm from Southern California. My dad worked in downtown San Diego at the time, and that's where MEPS was. And so I went down there and I joined as an AZ. And
Okay.
so after I got done, I walked up to my dad's office. I said, Dad, I joined the Navy. He said, okay, what are you gonna do? I said, I'm gonna be an ass. And he says, what's an ass?
Ass.
And I'm like, no, Dad, an AZ. And so, they give you that little sheet of paper that describes the job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Yep.
show my dad, and he said, come on, man, this is nothing but a yeoman for airplane. I don't want you to be no yeoman. And so this was like 5:30 at night, and we're like 1984. And he gets on the phone, and somehow he gets the head recruiter for San Diego, who happens
Wow.
to be a radioman. And my
Yeah.
dad served for 4 years in the 60s as a radioman. So he
Okay.
gets this guy on the phone, and he says, hey, Sparky, I don't want my son to be an ass. I want him to be a radioman like I was. And so they made me a radioman. So I came in the Navy as a radioman. And they
That's
renamed
funny.
us ITs in 1999. And then in
Mhm.
2002 was when I went Command Master Chief after picking up 9. And then I punched out
I
in
joined the
2000.
Navy in 2002.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
I just retired September 30th as a Master Chief.
As a Master Chief, right?
Yeah.
So, gosh. So, yeah. So I
Yeah.
retired or transitioned, whatever word is your flavor.
Yeah.
June. I came out of uniform February of 2015 and full retirement June of 15. I still have a corporate job, but from the military, those, darn near 31 years of my life. So it was great. It was a lot of fun, great memories. I love on my birthday going to social media and seeing all the birthday blessings from, 90% my military
Yeah.
family. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And I just laugh because it's like I joke with all my friends now that I'm the old retired guy, but I'm like, and then everybody's like, "You're not that old." I'm like, "Well, I feel like I'm that old."
You
So
like
like, I don't
it.
know what to tell you.
Yeah,
My
you got a little
body
bit of
feels
years before
59.
you don't have the gray beard going on.
It's a little. I got some in there. So you probably can't see it with my webcam being crappy. I've been
No,
trying
well,
to
one
upgrade
guy
my
is like
video quality.
David Carter. He just punched out
Mm.
after 35 years, and he actually has gray beard. This 6-inch long
Yeah.
gray scraggly beard. So
I like it. I'm hoping to get there eventually. I'm hoping it'll all just go gray.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah. And so yeah, man, like we talked a little before we started recording, but I've been like peripherally, I pronounce words
Yeah,
well.
that's a good word.
Aware
Oh,
of the Enlisted Leadership Foundation for a while. I think I was made aware of it just I stumbled on it on social media and I saw some stuff that Joanne Ortloff was posting in some groups or something like that. And then a buddy of mine was a mentor like 10 years ago. So like I was made aware of it. So I saw I think he was a Foundry mentor. And I saw it and I was like, what the hell is this? Like, and I looked into it. I'm like, do they just have like an enlisted leadership school in San Diego that I'm unaware of? And it turns out it's kind of true. I thought it was the Navy doing it when I saw some social media posts that he did about being a mentor. But like, I'm really interested. But like, I've been doing this for 7 years, and I started it initially because in my analysis at the time, being unaware of ELF, and I'm sure there's a couple other things out there that I've yet to discover, and this was pre-NLIC and everything else, is there was no leadership development. Like they just didn't exist. I went to the Senior Enlisted Academy when I was on my second shore duty as a chief, and it blew my mind that we have this capacity that is reserved for only the like the throughput that is like the bandwidth that they have at SEA, and that's it. But it and I don't know how much I even learned there. I enjoyed it a lot. But it was the idea that we had that capacity and we weren't using it at like every major fleet concentration area. Like it kind of pissed me off, to be honest with you. But it was also like a really, really great experience. So to learn about ELF existing, I'm wondering like how did it come to be? Like what did you see in 2015 or when you decided to found it? Because I'm really wondering if it's similar to the reason I started doing this. Is like I was just trying to create a resource for people that I didn't feel like was real because, like PO Indoc and all that stuff was a check in the box and nobody was really doing anything. So until you got to the chief season, you didn't really get any formal leadership development. And then the next real, outside of just like any fortuitous mentorship you get along the way, it's like the only real formal training. There's a chief season and then there's SEA and the end, unless you capstone it at the end. And the frustration for me has always been that it feels like by the time you're a chief select, a lot of bad habits or misconceptions or misunderstandings of the things you should be doing as a leader, those behaviors are validated by promotions and awards to a point where you're not going to teach them many new things a lot of the time. I don't think it's impossible, but I think it's a lot more difficult. But like, what's the origin story, man? What's the, how did you decide to found ELF?
Well, I'll tell you, you and I are we are very identical.
Okay.
We think a lot alike. And I'll probably touch upon same type of stuff. Okay. Since we have a good amount of time, I'm going to give you the non-Reader's Digest version. I'll give you the full-blown version.
It's my favorite kind. Let's do it.
Okay. So a little bit of history. So when I came up through the ranks, we had different formal leadership schoolhouses for E4s, E5, E6s. LMET was one, NAV Lead was one, NLDP was one, Navy Leadership Development Program. And in order to promote to that next pay grade, you had to graduate from that course. So ideally, if you're up for E4, you're going to go as an E3 to the class.
Right.
So that when you do get it, you've already got the certificate, you can be promoted. So then we go to war. And as a result of the war effort, by 2006, 2007, the Navy had over 50,000 waivers to promote without graduating from your respective leadership development course. Largely because each course was 2 weeks long. So you had to, be sent from your command for 2 weeks. And, you're in long enough to see how even though we started drawing down from the military in the mid-90s, it continues to a certain extent. We went from maybe having 4 deep at a rate down to maybe a single point failure. And so if I'm taking you off a ship or shore command, and when you go to these leadership schools, you're off the duty section as well. So it just became prohibitive to let people go because we were operational, we're at war. So the answer was there's no way we're going to be able as a Navy to go to make right, to make well. So let's just take the curriculum as best we can. And we're going to make a new curriculum that's going to last for 3 days. We're going to put it on a PowerPoint disk, or PowerPoint's put on a disk, and we're going to give every command in the military the disk. We're going to shutter all the brick and mortars, and the command level will do the leadership development.
What could possibly go wrong?
Oh, absolutely. So then what happens? And listen, one of the things we talk about is you learn more from failures than mistakes. Right. So part of the creation of this is a result of my own failures. And, so who do you take to teach leadership? Well, I'd love to take the best of the best, but listen, I need the best of the best in my cheese mess to make sure that we fight the ship. Yeah. So we take the people that may not be the best or just may have not the easiest job, not they have an easy job, not most critical, and say, hey, listen, I need you to teach this leadership class. So already, if you're going to rank them out, this may be my middle of the road to my lower. And then we say, and listen, I know it's supposed to be 3 days, but we got these.
We don't got time for that.
To be done in a day and a half. Yeah. So just
the CO wants to frock everybody on Friday, so you've got 8 hours.
So, and then ironically, and then even now you talk to people most people think that petty officer NDOC is leadership development, and it's
Right.
not. PO NDOC was separate from the leadership courses.
Yeah.
But that's kind of now what people think is the leadership. So by about 2012, honestly, from about 2008, 2009, I started working directly with the first class messes to provide leadership training, my chief's mess as well. But I could not agree more. Once you make chief, you've already been validated that all the leadership you've been doing up to this point.
Right.
Obviously, I'm doing it the way I should be doing it because
Otherwise they wouldn't. Yeah.
promote me.
Right.
And which, as an aside, one of my speakers that I have is somebody that was promoted up through the ranks and was a toxic leader. And this person will come into the class and tell this story. Very transparent.
That's great. That's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And so I ultimately, when I was the region master chief in San Diego, we had just started the CPO Legacy Academy. So the first Legacy Academy was on the USS Constitution, continues this day. It's a Navy sponsored and Navy funded program. And then the USS Missouri and Hawaii, they created a grassroots program. So then San Diego, a grassroots program was created by my predecessor, Nancy Hollingsworth. So I was walking across the street from my office to the Midway to sit down with Midway to schedule for the following year. And as I'm walking across with the senior chief of mine, and I said, this is such a great program. It's unfortunate that you have to be a chief selectee to attend. Wouldn't it be something if there was
Wouldn't it be something?
E6, any first class.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? Why don't we create something like that? What's the worst that's going to happen?
Right.
And so I had this idea, and I reached out. So I had just come off the USS Pellew, and I had this great senior chief on there by the name of Diane McQueen Gibson. She was an AOCS. She had just now picked up, she had transferred and then picked up Master Chief. She was the 5th AOCM and female AOCM in the Navy. And I ran into her at Coronado, and I'm like, hey, Diane, can you help me? You come by the office. I got this idea. So I pitched this idea to Diane. And what I've always appreciated is, especially as a command master chief, I always needed that chief or two that wasn't afraid about coming into the office, shutting the door, and saying, listen, Emperor, you got no clothes on.
Yeah.
The decisions that you guys are making, or you realize this, she was always, never would call it out to embarrass or, stump the chump, but would have the respect to do it behind closed doors. And so she was always been very brutally honest. So I pitched this idea. I'm like, what do you think? And just the idea was simply, I want to get civilians that have been successful in the community to teach about their leadership experiences. But I don't want to do it in an auditorium for a couple of days. I actually want to take the sailors to the places of business, because it's one thing, to say, hey, I retired from the Army and I taught leadership at West Point. But if I can take you to the university that you're now the dean of this prestigious private university teaching leadership, that just has a different impact.
Yeah.
And so we started the idea in February of 2013. May of 2013 was when the first Foundry class started. It lasted we showed up on a Sunday afternoon. We graduated on a Friday afternoon. We lived on board the Midway for those nights. There was a capacity for 60 first class petty officers and a dozen chief mentors. And all I did was I created, I got my master's degree in education technology. So I created a video, and I got myself a website. I sent one email to the Chiefs Mess in San Diego, said, hey, I want to try this thing. And I didn't tell anybody about it until about 6 weeks before we were going to, do it. And the reason being, because listen, and when I did tell people about it, it's like, why are you going to do that? Who's going to come? It'll never work, right?
Yeah.
But done it at the if I'd done it at the beginning, I would have got discouraged. So I waited. Well, this man is too far down the road, and then I knew. I said, you know what? If I ask people to send me people to fill the seats, who are they going to send? Well, they're going to send the best of the best. Well, I don't want the best of the best, right? Even in the Legacy Academy, and I had this guy when I was a command master chief at Assaultcraft Unit 5. We were going to send like our top chief selectee to the CPO Legacy Academy on Constitution. One of my senior chiefs at the time, who is now a retired command master chief, his name is Joe Gregatech. And Joe said, Dave, let's send, and he named this guy who was like middle to lower. He just like wasn't really getting it in the season. He said, let's send him. So into that mindset, I'm like, that's really who I want to impact.
Right.
Because the top of the top are probably doing it pretty well.
Yeah. I want the island of misfit toys. Send me them.
Yeah. And the very bottom, well, nobody will send them anyways. So I talked to this other buddy of mine. His name is Dave Flannery, and Dave was command master chief of NAVSA. And we were in the same building. I was telling him, and I'm like, wait. And he says, well, why don't you try doing an application? I'm like, oh, that's exactly right. So I said, what I'll do is I'll give a 2-week window, take them to this website. They'll watch this video with this great music. They'll submit this application. And then if they get accepted, then I'll say, this is what you got to pay. So that's what I did. I had 52 E6s apply. So our first class had 52 people. I didn't know how much to charge.
Right.
So I charged $195. It just seemed like a good number. And that paid for all the food for the week, a couple leadership books. We were able to use, I talked to the JAGs, and we were able to use Navy vans because this is Navy leadership. We had to use our own, like either a first class or a chief as the driver. Couldn't use like an E5. So that was fine. And then
were you were still active duty at the time?
Yeah, I was active during all this.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we had so we just traveled around. So I met some people through the nonprofit world, because as a region master chief or command master chief, you meet people. So we just created, and so during the day when the ship was open, we would go off the ship. We did physical fitness a couple times that week. We did, we visited some people. We'd always schedule it to get back to base so we could eat in a galley, because it was a lot cheaper that way. We get back to Midway about 5:30 at night. Then we did fireside chats. So we do a big roundup where we would talk about the day. How can we take some of the civilian leadership stuff and incorporate it into our daily life? And what we learned after that first class, and I'll tell you, so we did the graduation, and these sailors are like, Master Chief, this was life-changing. This was the best training. And we've experienced what it's like making chief when you go through initiation for 6 weeks. These sailors experienced in 1 week what we get, what it takes us 5 weeks. And by the fact that they all had to apply, they already have that in common. They're hungry for leadership development. But because they applied, their command didn't send them, they had to pay their own way. And that's where this idea. So then when I was like, we got to do this again. So we scheduled one for the next year. The plan was to do one a year.
Right.
So the next year we did it again. It was had more people apply, just as impacting. And like, man, we got to. And Diana's like, we can't stop.
Right.
So then, well, what's going to happen when and by then I'd already had this idea for an E5 program called the Leading Petty Officer Academy, and the idea of that came because I was with Mick Pond Stevens, and we were in a van, and this other guy Jeff, and we were talking. They had just come off a destroyer, talking with this E5, and this E5 says, Mick Pond, I don't know what to do. My first class made chief, and they transferred him, and then my chief got hurt, and they transferred him, and I'm the LPO and the chief. I've never had leadership training. I don't know what I'm doing. And immediately I'm like, oh, that's so that's and I said, you know what? We'll use the graduates from the foundry as volunteers.
Yeah.
we'll write the curriculum to teach this LPO Academy. And so that's how that came about. So then I talked to the JAGs about, can I start a nonprofit? And they're like, yeah, you can do whatever you want. That's fine.
Right.
The rules as a region master chief. And so what's funny is the first almost 3 years, I didn't realize I even started a business. I just thought I started a nonprofit.
Right. Right.
So that's, and we called it something else. And you mentioned Joanne Ortloff. We asked, after Joanne retired, we asked her to join our board. And so we got her on board, and we voted her in as our president. And the first thing she did, she was our president for about 18 months. And it was perfect because she had a lot of business sense that we didn't understand. We're a bunch of, we're six, master chiefs, right? We all have nobody, even to this day, we are a pass-through nonprofit. We all have jobs. Any money that comes in goes back into the nonprofit. And, because we get accused, people, because people are unfamiliar with a business, or they think that nonprofit should be free profit. They don't think we should make money, or they assume we're making money and we're paying our, none of that.
Right.
So give me a chance to talk. So Joanne, she's like, we got to change the name, because the original name was the San Diego Chief Petty Officer Association. So when you said you thought it was some Navy thing, and Joanne said that, it sounds like people are giving to the Navy and you can't. So we came up with the Enlisted Leadership Foundation, because by this time we'd had a couple Air Force and Coast Guard come through our classes. So since we called it ELF, we rebranded a little bit, made it more inviting for all military, and we have we're right now from a Foundry class, which is our E6 program. We're getting ready for class number 20. So for the last few years with COVID, we transitioned everything virtually, which then we were able to go from 2 classes a year to 3 classes a year. We went from doing 60 students each time living on board the ship to an unlimited number of students from around the world. We went from a speaker base that lived in San Diego to speakers from coast to coast, literally. And the level of speakers that we've been able to obtain. The last class, we had Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
Who,
yeah.
So, 8 years as a U.S. Senator and presidential candidate, we were able to bring her. And when we get these speakers for Foundry, it's not like, can you come talk for 15 minutes and we'll take notes? They come in for 90 minutes. And we just say, you talk for 10 or 15, 20 minutes. Trust me, the rest will
open it up. Yeah.
And I am blown away at the depth and level and professionalism of the questions. But we've brought in speakers because we get students. They'll say, oh, I got the perfect person. I've been able to use my podcast to pre-screen speakers. Some are great on a podcast and not there.
Yeah.
Some are like, oh, we need to bring you. Like one of our students, his mother-in-law is a lady named Bonnie Simi. And she was an Olympian in the 90s.
Wow.
Bobsled. And now she runs aerodynamic companies and stuff. And she's amazing.
That's crazy.
So we had her. I went through a program called the Institute for Veterans and Military Families out of Syracuse University. The guy that started.
I saw that. I was going to ask you about that.
Oh, Michael Haney comes in. Jerry Sanders, the former mayor of San Diego, he's one of our speakers. Chris. Cool. So one of the neatest things is, when I was in uniform, the admiral that I worked for, he had gone to an event, met with the CEO of Scripps Health in San Diego, and Scripps had a couple suites at a Padre game, and so we got a WAG to bring like 40 or 50 military. And I went as, the senior representative, and Scripps hosted at this Padre game. And the reason why is the Scripps Health CEO is part of his story is he was a police officer and got injured in the line of duty. So he had to do a career change early in his, but he's still a licensed sheriff of San Diego County. So it was a special night to recognize law enforcement. So I got talking to Chris during this dinner or this ball game, and I just said, "Hey, Chris, I got this thing on the side that I'd love to be able to share with you, one day out of uniform." He said, "Sure, here's my card. Give me a call." So I called him one day after work, and I told him about the foundation, the leadership. I said, "Would you be a guest speaker? And I'd like to bring the class to Scripps Health." They said, "I'd love to." Turns out Chris, I mentioned the E5 class. Chris created leadership programs at Scripps that are still going on.
Mm-hmm.
He had created a middle manager leadership class.
Oh, cool.
So it got to the point that he was opening Scripps Health for a day. He would let other speakers come in there to speak. They ended up sponsoring us and paying for the lunches. And when he found out by like our sixth class that everybody pays their own way,
Mm-hmm.
he went to his people and they became a sponsor to offset the costs of the foundry class,
That's
which
awesome.
allowed us to move away from Navy vans, Navy buses, to renting vans. Instead of always running around to go to galleys, we were able to hit a couple nicer places to eat. Instead of one or two books, library book for the library, we gave them about 5 or 6. It just allowed, we continued to up level each class. So, and then because of COVID, like I mentioned, we went virtual. We've had a class as big as 250. We average about 100. We've had Air Force and Navy. Each class has a senior enlisted leader and a command master chief, or we've had a command chief, Air Force type. We do active duty, reserves, and guard. We've had every branch, including Space Force, come through our programs. We do it all on Zoom from 7:30 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. And so I've got people that'll show up at, they can be in Cuba, they can be in Bahrain, they be in the Netherlands, all over the globe, mentors and students alike. We even had one of our command master chiefs. She was the command master chief for a couple classes ago. She was stationed in Spain. So they just adjust their schedule.
Yeah.
One of my speakers for the next class, he's a retired Marine general. He's currently doing work overseas. He's going to be overseas when we do it. But every speaker is hand selected for a specific reason. Because if people were to ask, what kind of leadership do you teach? We call it relational leadership. Because as a civilian and in the civilian world, this positional power of leader, what the Navy teaches, isn't going to be effective to be successful in the civilian world. Great, good for you in your position. You need to understand what being a relational leader looks like. And hearing from these leaders that are proven successful, failed along the way, but through their relationships and networking and how they treat people is how they got to where they're at and how they stay where they're at and help their company grow, whether it's a publicly traded company or a private organization. So that's the long of how the Enlisted Leadership Foundation came about. So we've kind of grown. We've also scaled back. We want to be able to grow beyond Southern California for a couple of different business reasons, but the capacity, we just don't have the time as a board of directors to do it. We don't have enough income through the programs or donations where we can actually hire somebody to be me, if you will, to go out and fundraise, to make the relationships, to grow it. But our tagline is building America's leaders, because who better to lead America than those that are willing to sacrifice our life for our country? There will never be a shortage of E5 and E6s. So whether we have 2 classes a year or 20 classes a year, we'll always be able to fill them. You mentioned, you heard about us through social media. When we started this back in officially 2014, that's when we got our approval to be a business. We said we would not use our current, because I was still on active duty, or future past positions to reach back inside the blue line to ask our friends to advertise for us. That we're not going to say, hey, brother or sister, I got another class coming out. Will you send this email to our, to your command again or deploy? If our students, through their experience of what they learned, isn't enough, that through social media and word of mouth, then we'll just cease to exist. And we'll know that's when we have outlived our usefulness. But we've continued to
Yeah.
grow over the time because of that social media approach. So we don't put the word out like people may think that we do. And I do a
Yeah.
weekly newsletter. I get phone calls and emails throughout the week to say when's the next dates for this class or that class.
Right.
And people are but people are still learning about it, right?
Yeah.
It's an ongoing. You got new people just made chief. Like never heard of this before.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
How have you found the Zoom classes? What's the plus and minuses of transitioning from the live classes to the Zoom classes?
So we'll start with the negative first because there's
Mm.
fewer negatives than positive. To be honest with you,
Okay.
the negative is simply the day-to-day, it's a face-to-face camaraderie and enjoyment and
Yeah.
connecting. Nothing
Right.
can ever fully replace that experience.
Right.
That's a combination of when we go back to the midway at night, when we do a large groups followed by small groups, when we were able to do some PT, some physical fitness in there. I mean, just as an
Mm.
aside, I'll tell you, you'll appreciate this. So, when you go through initiation, PT is a large part of our initiation to bring us
Mm.
together.
Yeah.
So, class number 2, we did PT. We scheduled 2 PT sessions. I don't know if you've ever been stationed in San Diego, but Naval Base
No,
San
I've
Diego.
visited, but
Okay, Admiral Prout Field. We scheduled to get the class out there 5 in the morning for 2 times. So remember, this class only 5.5 days long.
yeah.
Either Wednesday or Thursday of that class was our second PT session, and the mentors were getting ready to lead the session like we did the first day. And one of the first classes, hey, Master Chief, I'm a CFL, and so is Petty Officer so and so. Is it okay if we lead? I'm like, by all means, go.
Yeah, how many
Okay,
times I've held my breath, hoping that a chief select during the chief season would do something like that.
right. So we
Oh
had to do
man,
it. Then they
yeah.
mustered them all up. They formed them up, and they went from a
Mhm.
2-mile formation run.
Yeah,
Cadence and everything. We said nothing, zero prompting. When we
yeah.
ran back onto the football field, now there was commands out there. The
Mhm.
commands stopped and applauded.
Wow.
They had no idea what was going on, but they knew there was
Yeah.
right. So in the virtual world, however, I'll tell you what's just been amazing. So my vice president is a guy by the name of Jim Rich, and
Mhm.
Jim's funny. He called me as he was getting ready to transition, asking me some transition experiences and questions. And he said, "Is there anything I can do for you?" I'm like, "Yeah." As a matter of fact, Jim, my CMC for my next Foundry class coming up just had to bail, and the class is in 3 weeks. Would you be able to do it? And he's like, and I to this day he says I never told him he had to live on board the Midway, but
Nah.
I'm sure I did.
It's a
So
tough
he
life.
showed up to class and didn't realize. He said, "Man, I'll be honest. If I would have known I had to stay on the ship, I would have never said yes. But I'm committed." So we rearranged the
Yeah.
schedule quick. But he would tell you that his experience as the command master chief of that Foundry class changed his life and changed his direction of what he was going to do with himself after retirement.
Mhm.
And so Jim is my vice president now just because of the impact this had on him. And so he
Mhm.
runs Foundry with me. And what we immediately noticed, and when you're in a big group and you have a speaker, try to, who has any questions? It's like that first
Yeah.
dance, trying to get that first question out there, really challenging.
Yeah.
Um, and we'd get questions, but it was okay. In Zoom, the amount of virtual hands that goes up
Mhm.
during the conversation, let alone after the speaker's done,
Right.
we never, ever get a speaker that, well, I guess we're done.
Yeah, no
There's
questions.
always questions left after
Yeah.
90 minutes. And then you have the chat because you can't really have sidebars in a live thing,
Right.
but you can
Right.
have sidebars through chat. And
True. And they're not
they're not
distracting.
necessarily, man, what are you doing after class tonight? It's not like they're not
Right.
paying
Right.
attention. They're
Right.
like, they'll pick something out. Oh, and you'll see them comment like a quote of that speaker just said, or
Hmm.
this happened to me. And sometimes it's
Yeah.
triggering. There's
Yeah.
some speakers that, we'll get talking about some of those sensitive topics. And as a result of that, you know, all the mental health that we always have known there's been mental health challenges in the military. It
Right.
really came up through COVID. And now we're having a hard time dealing with it because there's so much
Hmm.
that we need to work through. Well, prior to COVID, or maybe it was as a result of one of our mentors who works with special ops in San Diego, recommended reaching out to this mental health professional, civilian, who
Hmm.
does things with SEALs. So we did. She has been a speaker with both us for both of our
That's awesome.
classes. And so we've incorporated before mental health was truly the thing it is now. We've already incorporated a mental health component into our programs, which
That's awesome.
it has given people. I cannot tell you how many firsts that people have shared of their experiences. How many people have come to the Foundry and the LPO Academy that never felt safe to share how
Hmm.
they were treated or how they saw others treated? And it's not from a victim at
Yeah.
all, nor is it that I'm entitled. It's I've never known or felt that I could or anybody would
Hmm.
understand. But because once again, everybody's asked to come there. Everybody's looking for something. They're
Yeah.
looking to be, and we'll get from anywhere from a 5. In fact, we've had a 4-year E6.
Hmm.
We've had even in the we've had E6s when we were face to face that are on terminal leave, right? They can't even make chief. They're
Yeah.
paid to come through Foundry. So
Hmm.
we get the full gamut.
Yeah.
We one of the I had one thing we ask for both mentors and students is, have you ever been to Captain's Mast? Have you ever had a DUI? Things like that. I had a
Hmm.
guy call me during an application this first class. Do I have to be honest about a DUI? And I'm like, you do what you need to do.
Yeah.
And this person was, but the truth of the matter is, when you did that and you said you did go to Mast or you did fail PRT or whatever the question was, because we changed them, that was it.
Yeah.
I immediately took you
Yeah. Yeah.
because the transparency,
Hmm.
and I've seen more people grow as a result of those failures than
Yeah.
not. So Zoom, the having the chat room, the freedom, being here, we feel much safer in our own home to be vulnerable,
Yeah. Well,
right? So it's
I
and
wonder how
people
much
don't
of
get
that
too
is
burnout.
that you guys are civilians now, like that there's not like, so when I was doing this on active duty, I think there was a certain amount of apprehension, and I constructed the way I approached the podcast around this of like, this guy's an active duty chief, senior chief, and then master chief, right? And I wasn't hiding that fact, but I didn't use my name, I didn't use my face until I retired, because I didn't want anybody to be able to point at it and be like, this dude's doing this for an eval bullet, or he's doing it for some other reason than, or some other motivation than to just help us.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if that willingness to be vulnerable and the willingness to be honest and have those types of discussions, like I for sure agree with the comfort level of, I'm in my own home, I'm behind the computer lens, whether or not my camera's on or not, whatever. So it like gives them a little more comfort with sharing it. But also that there's not any fear of like reprisal or repercussions or anything like that. Cause you get some conspiracy theorists out there on the internet, man. Like on Reddit, the way sailors talk behind the mask of anonymity, which is Reddit,
Mhm.
the stories they tell, you can tell there's a certain percentage, and it varies depending on how like bitter and jaded the person is, of like their it's their way of like, even though you're kind of shouting into the abyss, it's like it's their way of kind of like punching back when they feel like
Mhm.
they've been slighted or taken advantage of or not taken care of by their leaders. But then there's a lot of truth in it too, like where you can kind of pull a lot of really great information. And I've actually come across a lot of really awesome guests through Reddit as well. But yeah, I wonder if it's not that that's not a big component of it, just knowing that, like you're retired. So what other reason are you doing this for? You're not getting a paycheck. Like you're not like, I'm not driving a Ferrari because of this. And I'm not doing it for some kind of eval bullet in the military. It's not benefiting me in any other way than like the satisfaction of helping people. So, and I think they probably pick up on that.
Yeah. It's, so I will say when we were face to face with Foundry, when we did our, the thing that makes Foundry so successful, it's that the mentors at night. It's those fireside chats.
Yeah.
The speakers is amazing. The content is incredible. But having the senior enlisted leaders share from their experiences, become vulnerable themselves, which is a requirement, because even the mentors submit an application and they pay their own way, right? So everybody's in this together. And what we learn is and remember, this started for Navy first, right? Now that we have everybody, it's a heavy Navy.
Right.
But those sailors, they would leave and they're like, I wish I had you as my chief. And the chiefs would leave. I can't believe there's chiefs out there treating you like this or doing this kind of thing, right? So it's really, that's what makes this so special, is those relationships that continue long after the class graduates. And we've been able to maintain that in the virtual world, and expand it a bit, because Jim and I, as well as some of the other board members from time to time, we'll pop in to the fireside chats at night. And so there may be somebody, because we also, we're not any more skilled than anybody else. We just have more experience than a lot of them.
Yeah.
So there's times that we can offer stuff maybe beyond even what the mentors can. So we've been known to take a student offline into our own little breakout room and just let them, get things, and we've continued on conversation down that road. And it's funny because we also go back and forth on creating a senior enlisted class or senior enlisted program.
I was going to ask about that. Like, why isn't there a Chiefs class? Like,
and here's goes back to what we said, that it's really hard to teach a chief because they've already learned.
Right. Well, they think they have.
So we focus predominantly on the E5 and E6s because they'll be chiefs. And that's how we're, and so now after 8 years, we're seeing enough. This has been our gauge. We are getting 2 or 3. We get about 24 mentors per Foundry class. We're getting about 2 or 3, sometimes 4 of those former Foundry students.
Yeah.
So we're seeing enough people that were impacted through Foundry as a first class make chief and then come back as a mentor. That now it's time that we think we can make a chief's class that could be supported without somebody thinking, why do I need this? Because we still want it. It would look a little differently. We got some ideas. I think we thought about starting one in 2023, but I think what we're going to do is focus on, we started doing an annual leadership symposium in San Diego. We did one. The second one, we're getting ready to do, the pandemic hit, so we just moved it all to a virtual symposium. But we're going to actually do 2 Foundry classes next year, 3 LPO academies, and in place of that 3rd Foundry class, we're going to do a leadership symposium.
Okay.
Plus, we have Chief Petty Officer Pride Day, which once the Navy lets us know, the plan, talking with Russ Smith, was the plan was to return pinning back to September 16th for 2024 or 23. So once that gets confirmed by the new MCPON, then we could schedule CPO Pride Day. And we just learned over the years, try to do a leadership class in January or December doesn't really work. Even November, we try to avoid. So that really narrows it down to 9 months. You can't do it much during August or September because of CPO season, since we need the chiefs as mentors and stuff. So just, things that we've learned over the years.
Right. So can you go into it, like we've talked about it a little bit, but can you go into a little detail on like what is the Foundry and what is the LPO Academy? Like I know, like, one's for E6s, one's for E5s, but like, can you go into some detail about like what each course provides?
Yeah. So if you look at Foundry, I mentioned Foundry as a relational kind of, as a whole, ELF is relational. Foundry is where the most of it takes place. But we came up with, I wanted a reason for somebody to come back to their command and to their command master chief and say, okay, so you just spent however many hundreds of dollars to go do this. What'd you get out of it? I wanted to give them talking points, if you will. Not, and that probably sounds like I'm trying to brainwash them or something. Nothing further from the truth. If you think of when your time in uniform, or if you're in uniform, every command, doesn't matter the branch of service, commanding officer has their mission vision for their time, and they have their talking points. They have their 3 paragraphs, 5-pointed star, whatever. So I wanted something like that, but that was from a marketing perspective. What's going to be simple? So me and this guy named, one of my mentors, his name is Ken Ballard. Ken, I was his command master chief on Macon Island, and he was a new chief. He made chief coming out of Navy Nav Lead. So just a neat guy. So I'm like, dude, I need you to be my mentor. And he was a chief, and I was a CMC. In fact, when I asked, Ken became a command senior chief and then eventually command master chief. But as a command senior chief for my retirement, I'd asked Mike Stevens to be my speaker, and he couldn't come out for it. So I said, hey, Ken, Mick Bond couldn't be my guest speaker. Will you do it? He's like, wait a minute, what? But that's what I think about Ken. And he's now doing great stuff, teaching JROTC at a high school in Las Vegas. But Ken was stationed in Massawa when I created Foundry, and I said, listen, and so for the second class, I'm like, Ken, I need help creating. So together we came up with what we call a leadership triangle, that the 3 points of the triangle is speak, share, shadow. Because leadership starts with communication. Communication comes in the form of physically speaking, virtually, listening, speaking, and visually speaking. Okay, we speak in all 3 senses, if you will, or 2 senses and verbal, however. But it starts with communication. Communication is through sharing. You got to be able to share your stories, and beyond stories, you got to share of who you are. And when people build that trust because of your sharing and that connection, then you get permission to be their mentor, and they try to shadow you. The Navy in 2003 came out with everybody will have a mentor. You have, so command said, you have 90 days once you check on board, or you're going to get assigned a mentor. When they started the program, you got 30 days to find a mentor, or you're going to get assigned a mentor. Well, that's all fine, and you could assign mentors all day long. But if there's never been a relationship or connection, you're only going to get that tip of the iceberg. You're never going to get the 90% below the water. So our feeling is true leadership is about building trust. True trust cannot be developed without connecting. Connecting cannot be developed without communicating. You can't get to sharing without communicating. You can't become a mentor without first connecting and sharing and trust. Speak, share, shadow is the formula to leadership. All of our speakers touch upon communication, the value relationship, and their own mentoring, who was their mentor and how that affected them. So that is the core of Foundry. They get 17 speakers in a 5-day period of time for each day across all spectrums. 80% of our speakers had never served. We do have an active duty 06 that's there for a specific purpose. We have a couple retirees for a very specific message, but it all is wrapped around this leadership triangle. So that's what they get with Foundry. LPO Academy is different. If you remember the story, I said that E5 bosun mate.
Yep.
So the idea is, listen, how many other E5 bosun mates are out there that don't have a foundation on where to start? Just tell me how to get started. We're military. we'll figure it out. You know, just tell me where the gutter is and give me the bowling ball. I may only get one pin, but I'm gonna get a spare and then some strikes. So our goal is, what are the things as an LPO you really want to know? How to provide, not necessarily how to give an award or have a right award, but give an input on an award, input on evaluations, how to be a working supervisor, how to monitor and work alongside, how to sit through, and do a mentoring, how to do a counseling. Some of the stuff that we teach through initiation season, we're teaching at that E5 level.
As well you should, sir.
Man, when I
That's
sat
exactly
a
when that
board,
should be happening.
oh, I was blown away. I sat this cheese board and I'm like, these E5s, it's clear that these fives got a better idea of what it's going to take to be a chief than some of the E6s, and we're going down looking at E5 and E6 packages to make chief. So,
and I sat the board and I couldn't even just the quality, and I use that term loosely, of the evaluations I reviewed. Like, this didn't just get inputs from the E6. This then went through a chief, and then a department chief probably, and a CMC, and a admin chain. And I'm like, the fact that like some of the stuff I was reading, I was just like, ooh, how did this make it into an OMBF? Like,
so
good Lord.
And so instead of, us board members or master chief teaching these LPOs, and this also goes back to what you said too, right? About if I put a bunch of chiefs in a room in front of E5s, they'll listen, they'll be in receive mode, but we need them transmitting as well. We need them being free to answer questions. So we said, and plus, listen, I was an LPO in 1995. Okay. 93, 94 was the last time. What am I going to teach somebody as an LPO today? So that's where the idea was, let's take our Foundry graduates. Now they've already invested, right? They understand this relational leadership. They understand the value of communication, building relationships, connecting, and mentoring. Let's now put them in front because they're LPOs. They've had some success. So we wrote the curriculum alongside them. And they deliver this, what started as a 2-day course that's now expanded into a 3.5-day course. And we've given those E6s the liberty to have this course be living and breathing. So every class, their curriculum is updated. The delivery, the content is pretty much still the same. We do expand it based on different instructions. We tried to make it more DoD and less Navy centric. And in the virtual space, we've been, because we've developed more graduates, which brought in more potential volunteers to facilitate. We have them do. So I've got a core set of 3 E6s that oversee the program, that run the program. And then I have a retired master chief by the name of Rosa Wilson. She's on our board of directors. So she runs the LPO Academy. I mentioned Jim and I oversee the Foundry. Diane, still with the board, one of the founding board members. She oversees CPO Pride Day. So she worked with those 3. And then for the 4 weeks before class starts, they're developing the PowerPoints and they're doing a weekly teach back. So where the people who are giving the topic, they're practicing. And so the first time they give a product isn't at the class.
Right.
And it's still done virtually. We still limit the number of seats to 50 because we've just found we can do more. We always get about 100 applicants. So we say no a lot more to the LPO Academy than we do for the Foundry.
That's interesting.
But we don't have we don't do nighttime. We have a hard start stop. We know that getting a command to allow an E5 to stay home for 3.5 hours, and that's one of the reasons why we use Zoom, is we know DoD won't allow it on the network. So therefore, we know they can't sit on the network at work. They can't do it, right? It's kind of by design. But surprising or not, we usually get we select 55, and we get between 45 and 50 that show up because typically commands They apply, and then they go to the command and ask
Yeah,
permission.
they're like, hey, I got accepted to this
And
thing.
the
Yeah,
command
yeah.
say no. And a lot of times because they've never heard of us, so they
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So I get it. And we tell them that's why when people apply, because I'll get calls say, how much is it for me to apply? Applying is free. You don't pay for
Mm-hmm.
the class until you get selected, and then I send you a separate link that tells you how
Right.
to pay for it. Um, so and so, so when it comes to E5, you learn how to write those evals, do counseling. We do breakout sessions throughout the class where then this facilitator go in there and monitor. They have some homework, like the old egg divisions. They do.
Yeah.
Okay, so that concept.
They're
So they
still
do.
doing that.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, like, and what's hilarious, and this is a bit of a tangent, so I'll try to not go too far down the rabbit hole.
Okay.
Is like a lot of the experiences I hear lately, it's like they assign the egg divisions, they make the eggs, and then a lot of the actual meat that's on that bone never even happens. Like they never get tasked with the eval or the counseling or the, hey, this guy died, go look at the Keiko instruction or whatever. It's like you're completely missing the point. Like we're not doing arts and crafts for arts and crafts sake. It's like there's no real value to that besides maybe a laugh. It's like the meat on the bone is the tasking that comes from it. And
Yeah, very true. And I always, when I was doing initiation, that was always my thing. If we're not going to do anything with it, we're not going to do
Mhm.
it.
Yeah,
It's and tangent. What I always get frustrated with is how I can see these first classes treated well by
Mhm.
chiefs. All of a sudden, they make chief,
And
and during initiation, they're treated like crap. It's almost like you got
yep,
to prove, which then confuses, and then they get pinned, and now those Chiefs are going up, hugging them, high fiving them. Like, wait a
right,
minute,
right.
you've been a
It's
jerk
too
to me the last 6 weeks. I want nothing to do with you. How is?
it's too often viewed as a selection process, and it's
Yeah,
like,
and
hey,
it's
guy, that happened already. Like
exactly who am I?
I've stood in the middle of a final night acceptance and listened to the majority of the Chiefs us try to convince the CMC that we should not accept this person
Yep,
because they're not ready. And I'm like, do you not understand what this is, man? Like, this isn't a literal acceptance. It's a symbolic moment of self-actualization in which we want to see the switch flip in
yep.
their head that, oh, I'm a chief now. Okay, I get it. And I'm just, yeah, and it happens still to this day. I
It does.
still get chiefs reaching out and tell me that,
And then
yeah,
again,
yeah,
I'll just talk about the Foundry class.
mm-hmm.
I was so impacted personally by listening to these. Some of it confirmed what I suspected.
Right,
Over a few years, that I've even known CMCs to come through. The only people actually that are hand selected for every Foundry class is that senior enlisted person who's going to be
mm-hmm.
the command master chief. So
Right,
that CMCs have changed how they run their initiation season as a result of their experience with Foundry and talking with those first classes.
good,
There's more. I tell people, trust me, there's more value for you going on weekly hikes and PT sessions and stuff
mm-hmm.
than any PowerPoint training that you try to put
Yeah,
them through. That
yep,
building those relationships during the season is going to make your mess far stronger
mm-hmm.
than some of the reindeer games.
Yeah,
So that's what the E5 class is all about. It is very heavy Navy.
yeah,
We go back and forth. We've thought about changing the name because
right.
LPO. We
Like a
did
first
do.
line leader course or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we added the word workshop on it to make it sound less formal. Because it is.
yeah,
There's breakout sessions. There's the scenarios and things.
mm-hmm.
Um, we do probably get a lot of Marines because they're embedded with Corpsman. Corpsman is probably the
Yeah.
biggest rate that comes through the E5 class, to be honest with you. But yeah, so that's so we've kind of the CPO Pride Day. That's our other big event, and that costs us a lot of money. We try to make a little bit of money on that event because that helps offset the costs of admin costs and for the year, and then as well as bring down costs specifically for the E5 program.
What's the goal of CPO Pride Day?
So our goal of CPO Pride Day is for the chief selectees to show them to give them a visual look of what the CPO mess that they're soon to
Mm-hmm.
be a part of, the relational power, the networking power, and the strength of the mess. So
Okay.
when you get, so the last CPO Pride Day, we had 2,500. We had 700 and about 700 selectees and the rest genuines. We turned away probably about 100 because we just sold out. And the number of relationships that were, we met each other in boot camp, and now they're a senior chief, and I've just made chief. The number of foundry students that I was the last one of my foundry group, and my other teammates are here. They made it over the last,
that's cool.
And then to do the cadence competition, to see the teamwork come together. So from a leadership, networking and relationships and mentoring is all part of it. Sometimes it's an assumed, the networking and mentoring is an assumed part of leadership, but it's something that needs to be actively pursued, and to see it visually played out shows at CPO Pride Day, it could just show the importance of it. So that's, and then what we also have provided from a goals perspective. So that's our overall goal from the Enlisted Leadership Foundation for doing it. It started in 2004 by then Force Master Chief Karen O'Connor. I only took it over running out of the Region Master Chief's office, but it was being funneled through my CPOA. And it was costing about $60,000, $70,000 when I took it over, and all that. I'm like, who's accountable for this? We just take cash and checks. I'm like, whatever, check bounces.
Yeah, we just do it.
Right. So by bringing this under the Enlisted Leadership Foundation, that now gave it protection, protected the Navy, and then I was able to grow it as well. So when I took it over, we had about 700-800 people attend. Now we have, before the pandemic, we had 3,000 people that would attend.
Wow.
And because of the changes to fundraising during CPO season, we started getting requests from CPO messes. Will you allow us to come sell challenge coins?
Yeah.
And so we were like, why not? And then, so we did that. And then we saw that as an opportunity to make a little bit of money ourselves by charging a CPO mess a small vendor fee. We ended up moving locations after COVID to a much larger area. This last Pride Day, we had 70, we'll call them 70 sponsors. 50 of those sponsors are CPO messes that had that. So if you want to have a vendor booth, it was $1,200, but we would charge $250 to a CPO. We gave them that military discount, if you will. And there's messes that would make $10,000, $12,000, $13,000 selling stuff.
Wow.
And then there's corporate sponsors that would pay different prices, whether they're a nonprofit, for-profit, maybe they're a veteran-owned company. We had different discounts in there. So it's not about, yes, it's about making some money, but we needed to offset costs. This year, and this is all public knowledge, people, if you go to a nonprofit, website, you see our financials or ask form. That's any nonprofit. It's all public. It's all public. So CPO Pride Day for 2022 cost $205,000 to put on.
Good grief.
And if we tried to do it with just the ticket sales alone, we would have been $20,000 short of breaking even, which that money then to break even would have taken away from our program development and how we offset costs. Because even in Zoom, there's a cost for every class, because we do send them a lot of stuff. And we did one class years ago, absolutely free. And it was a fine class, but you can actually even tell the interest.
How bad do you want to be there?
So there's always going to be some level of a cost.
Right. What it's kind of a weird question. Have you, and you may have had conversations, like you said, you were talking to Russ Smith when he was MCPON, is there ever, to me, and I don't even know if there's an awareness at that high of a level. I imagine Russ is probably aware of it, but at the level that you would need to have the type of support and funding to do something like Navy wide, it's why doesn't the Navy just cut you a check, and put one of you in every, because they're rolling out the NLEC ELD stuff where they're doing the flight line or whatever they call it, where it's the shore duty guys are going through the facilitator courses and then teaching the classes. I've heard good things about it. I haven't got to experience anything with it. I was trying to go to one of the facilitator classes before I retired just to see. But it's one of those things where it's like there's always going to be the same obstacles you described to like when we got rid of Nav Lead, which I caught the tail end of, and I thought it was pretty solid. Like I went to the Work Center Soup classes, second class. I got something out of that.
Yeah, situational leadership stuff.
Yeah, and it's so but there's always gonna be that type of a hurdle to overcome where like we don't have the like to make it a command delivered, or even with the shore duty facilitators, it's like everybody gets pulled in so many directions. Every shore duty I've ever been on, we've been undermanned. Yep. So it's like it's even unrealistic almost to put that burden on a conglomeration of just random local shore duty people that are probably volunteering because they see it as a fit rep bullet and maybe they're passionate about it, but it's like it's still another demand on an active duty sailor that has a primary duty and probably collateral duties and all this other stuff. So like in my mind, the answer is dudes like you and me. And it's just like I don't need to make money off of it. I know so many retired COBs, CMCs, chiefs, whatever, officers, warrants that would like volunteer their time just to be around sailors again, like and happily do so, like without any cost to anybody. So I've never understood why the Navy does like just cut a check to. So you're already doing it. You're probably doing it far better than any formal Navy program. Like no nav admin is going to fix this. So it's like, have you ever had a conversation like that? And do you understand there to be resistance, or is it just something that's not even on their radar?
Okay. Boy, there's a lot of...
Yeah, there's a lot there.
No. I just want to answer succinctly. Russ has been... So I met Russ in 2008. We both sat a selection board together. So we've been friends since then. When I started ELF and I was still the region mess chief, Mike Smith at the leadership mess symposium he held, he asked me to come and share about the enlisted... It wasn't called ELF, but share about the Enlisted Leadership Foundation, the Foundry class, the OP Academy. We were doing a CPO Legacy Academy. Remember, I mentioned that early on. We actually stopped that. We did not do it this year, and we're not doing. We let it go because it was the one class that command master chiefs had to send us students, and we could never fill seats. They would not send us enough people to make it cost effective, and because they did not want What we were told is, I don't want to send people somewhere to learn things I don't know what they're going to learn, to have control over something that I can't see what's going on, and I don't want to break up my group. But yeah, what happens once you make chief and they get disbanded? Just got tired of fighting it. So Russ and Navy leadership has known about ELF and what we do. Some don't like it. Some aren't a fan of it. Some who have never attended don't understand. Why would anybody want to come to me, to ELF, when they could do it with them? They don't have to. Now, the other thing is I've been asked, why don't I figure out how to do government contracting, even though I'm a nonprofit, and make it? My fear, or our fear on the board, you think about Foundry. How do you put a dollar amount on having people give their own time as volunteers to come speak? And then there's a concern of we lose kind of control of what it is. So the military supports what we do. They know about us. There are commands that pay for their students. Probably about 15% each class, they can get their command to pay. The fact that the military supports us, and we do not try to compete with anything they do. Yeah, we know what I've talked to people that are part of the development and stuff. And they've said, hey, we actually love what you do. Because we get people after they've come to your classes and they're so hyped up now for leadership. They're in this other kind of mindset as they come to learn more. And that's something else we do with both LPO Academy of Foundries. We learn is when you submit your application, the next time you hear from us isn't the first day of class. We have it set up so that for 4 weeks leading up to class, you're meeting your mentor, you're receiving weekly emails. We're giving you we have you listen to podcasts. We have you
Mm-hmm.
do an exercise. We have you do a leadership book, one a week, because these are the leadership. We want you to be introduced to different leadership tools so that when you show up for class, you're already anxiously anticipating, like, man, I'm getting hyped up for what's coming next.
Yeah. That's
so,
cool.
But yeah, so listen, Russ is great. In fact, he came to CPO Pride Day this year, the first time he's ever been to one.
Oh, wow.
He had certain opinions that he kept to himself, and he wasn't the only one there who had never been but had opinions based on what they heard. And I'll just share that these opinions weren't necessarily the best.
Right. I had the same feelings about it, and I went to one locally, and I don't know. I feel like my negative opinions were validated in a lot of ways, unfortunately. But but that goes down a whole thing with me in initiation and like kind of some of the things you mentioned, the way that they do it, the reindeer games, blah, blah, blah.
Well, these guys both left pleasantly surprised. Some stuff that we do, they still did. Probably the one thing our CPO Pride Day gets negative feedback on is some people are having the CPO messes come out there and sell stuff as fundraisers. That some people that can rub people because to them it takes the focus off of that networking piece. And so 2 years ago, when we came back after COVID, that was some feedback. And so what we did this year is we told the vendors, you cannot open up until after the guest speaker is done. So we made sure things were separated differently. We just approach things differently. So we welcome the feedback. We get the feedback.
Right.
Sometimes that feedback we could do nothing about, but gets a chance to respond to and give the why. But others like, dude, that's a great point. We're gonna use that, and then it's kind of like command assessment, right? What's the point of having a command assessment when you get all that information and you do nothing with it? But when there's some low hanging fruit, when there's something that really, what's the big deal to make that change? And there's a lot of low hanging fruit out there that sometimes we get hung up on doing because I just got to hold it, man. Pull the fruit. The benefit from getting rid of that, from pruning it. Look at your plants. You prune them and they grow better.
Yeah.
So,
So I'm going to pivot on you a little bit. I'm curious. So when did you make chief? What year was it? And I'm not trying to make you feel old. 96. What? So I've always been curious. I've been trying to get somebody on that was a chief in the 90s. And so I'm just curious, like what was it like then versus like you were in until 2015. So you experienced, like 2 decades as a chief. So like how did it evolve? What changed? And I've had people ask, I read they linked an article in the Blue Jackets manual and all the laying the keel stuff. What's it called? Good God. Teaching of the Creed. And it's like the copy I have is like a 1917 Blue Jackets manual. And there's that article, short talk with chief petty officers. Right. And reading that article, like I did an episode, I did a whole Teaching of the Creed series, and the episode I did on, I believe it was credibility of a chief, I did with a first class, because I'm like, who better to question the credibility of a chief than a first class? So we talked about that, and we talked about the CPO Creed, and he's like, why isn't this the CPO Creed? Like the summary at the end of that article is much more succinct, and this is who we are, and this is what we do as chiefs. And so I've been asked, like, was it better before? Like, because even when you look at the way that person articulated themselves in that article, you're just like, wow, you don't hear a chief talk like this very often. And when you do, it's usually like a fleet or something, or a force that's been in those circles where they've gotten those chops to like talk in front of people very well. Was it significantly different? Was it good or bad? Do you think the changes that you've seen kind of happen in the 2 decades you were chief, and then even since then, like I've often wondered, like, was it better? Like, are the chiefs in the Navy Times comments section correct, or was it just different for its own reasons and it's evolved naturally, kind of thing? I've always been curious about that.
So in David Dearie's humble opinion, I like using the word different than better because
Okay.
better well, how do you define better? What's better to
Right.
you? But it was
Right.
different.
Okay.
So when I made chief, they said the number one rule of the chief is to train your junior officer.
Mm-hmm.
That's for me. Then it was taking care of your family, take care of your sailor, take care of your family, taking care of self. So self came last.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it was always about the junior officer, which my dad never understood, right? Because
Yeah.
like well, they're an officer, but
Yeah.
and even now it's understanding as a chief, you're part of that mini triad, and
Mm-hmm.
and, and as a command master chief, my JO is an XO.
Mm-hmm.
So learning over time, so I figured out that taking care of my junior officer. But when I made chief, we found out in June. So we
Mm-hmm.
had a 10-week initiation.
Wow.
And when we had training, there was the making chief when I made it was all about getting me out of the arrogance that I may have had, relying and trusting of my fellow chiefs and showing me what it's like to be humble by embarrassing me and making me do
Mm-hmm.
things that I
Yeah.
that are silly and stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Nothing dangerous, nothing obscene,
Mm-hmm.
but like Forrest Gump had just come out. And I was actually, so I made chief. I was stationed at Naval Training Center, San Diego. I was the last group
Mm-hmm.
to go through as they brack. So we were bracking at the time. And I had
Mm-hmm.
just graduated from college. I was in a program called the Enlisted Education Advancement Program. So I
Okay.
had just graduated from San Diego State University with a bachelor's degree. And early in the training, they, yelling at me and asking me some questions. And I made some comment about being smart because I'm a college graduate. Man, and they pick up
Whoops.
on that. And they made me run around the room like
Mm-hmm.
Forrest Gump, saying, I'm Forrest Gump. I'm Forrest Gump. Then I had to
Yeah.
memorize lines like Forrest Gump. So every
Yeah.
training session, I had to be Forrest Gump. Um, they, so they, and we did stupid dead bug, PT, and different things.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't do PowerPoint. We
Mm-hmm.
did PT. We had this master chief that would run with us 3 or 4 mornings a week. Dude, that was money. Because
Yeah.
now there was that dude that he was vulnerable. He kind of shared he went to mast, how it took him so long to make senior chief and master chief, but now he's a
Mm-hmm.
command. And so there was a little bit of everything. So that was the different part. I think that intelligent piece that you mentioned about the writing,
Mm-hmm.
you could look at education over the 100 years of how
Right.
kids, how
How
much
it's
smarter they
changed.
appear
Yeah.
to be then versus now.
Yeah.
Then you got to figure where we've come through technology, even before social media. So things had to become different and change
Mm-hmm.
because people changed. So when you hear a lot of us say, when I made chief back then,
Mm-hmm.
you get a lot more out of today. Today we do teach a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
But what I feel and kind of what I was always trying to do as a CMC, how do I teach you to be humble?
Yeah.
And I became really humble by singing Rubber Ducky, by
Yeah.
doing Dead Bug, by running
I'm a
around
little
like
teacup.
Forrest Gump, because it took me out of a shell. And I knew that
Yeah.
every one of them had to do the same thing at some point. When I was telling
Mm-hmm.
my wife last night, we went went on a little trip, and I was just
Yeah.
reminiscing. Man, when I made chief, I had to suck on a mackerel soaked in Tabasco sauce
That's so
with
right.
my nose against a bulkhead at attention, humming acres away for an
Oh
hour.
wow. I would have.
Okay,
Yeah. I
was there
can't
any value to
imagine.
that?
No.
No, dude,
No.
it's funny as crap. I couldn't eat
Yeah.
Tabasco sauce, but yet there's another time
Yeah.
that I'm sitting there with this bowl of oysters and squid and fish oil and Tabasco and the nastiest stuff. And next to me with this other selectee, this big burly African American, the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
He's freaking in tears. Literally, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
snot, tears. I can't do it. Chiefs are yelling, "You're going to eat it," yelling at him. I downed mine. I threw it. I took his. I ate his and gave him the empty bowl. But that's what my initiation season taught me.
Wow.
Now, I never figured out how to teach that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not that I needed food to do it.
Yeah. I think the shared adversity
is hard.
Yeah. Shared adversity, I think, is the biggest value added from Chiefs initiation, regardless of how you do it. I think the way that we've accomplished it historically and even up till now leads to a lot of like alienation of those people going through, and you get a lot more people nowadays that are like, we're just teaching them to hate Chiefs. We're just validating all of the what we call misconceptions that E6 and below have by behaving this way during the Chiefs season. And so now they don't trust you, but now they're a part of the mess. And so it's like it creates this really strange dynamic that, or conflict really, that does not add value.
You know, it's I tell you, one of my favorite initiation seasons when I was at ACU 5, and I'll be honest, man, ACU 5, because you have so many people in that hovercraft world that have been there for, I mean, they show there as an E4 and they leave there as a mass chief in some cases. So they've really developed their season really well. I mean, some of the stuff they do. But I remember this one year, some guys were all PTing down the beach, some Chiefs, and they came back with this big railroad tie kind of log. And it was big, square, and heavy, and they painted it blue. And then yellow, they wrote responsibility. And then final night, they had it sit behind the selectees, and then and they said, do you think you are ready to handle the burden and responsibility of a chief petty officer? And they said yes. And they made them about face. And we had like 10. They had to pick it up and put that thing. And for the next 3 hours, they had to walk through these areas. And at different times along the way, they would make a couple peel off to have that burden of responsibility. So to feel the weight of the responsibility of a chief petty officer, as well as the needing when other chiefs don't support you or help them.
How much heavier it is.
Yeah, it was so good. So, you know, to
like
your
that
point. So it's but listen, at the end of the day, and the other thing is, I think today, because of the availability, listen, the precepts are out there. So I love the fact that you have your precepts there. But what I don't love is people then become, I've had selectees, I just figured out what I needed to do to make chief because I read the precepts and I made sure I did those things. I handed my eval and here I am. But it kind of
Kingsbury likes to tell me all the time that about how like the precepts dictate behavior, like what we put in the ECPs and everything else. So it's like, if we're going to say that involvement in the first class mess is important, or involvement in whatever we're calling CPO phase 1, whatever this week, it's like, then they're just checking the box at that point. Like I saw so many evals at the Chiefs board that said actively involved in CPO 365. And I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? You show up, meet.
Exactly.
Like I was like, you're not coordinating events. You're not leading anything. You're not actively involved in a way that's meaningful where you can demonstrate to me the effect that you had on all these other people.
Raise the rate by 75%.
Yeah.
I'd rather have you say 2 or 5, you know?
Yeah. Checking boxes. Yeah.
That means nothing to me.
Yeah. It's frustrating. I'm not a giant fan of us laying out the roadmap quite that way, but like, I do want them to know it. Like, I think it's more our problem in creating an evaluation system that accurately reflects the sailor I'm evaluating at the Chiefs board, because right now we don't, like, in my opinion, we don't have that. Like, I left the Chiefs board feeling disgusting.
Yeah.
I was not, and this was post, like, they revised the process after the 9 board got shut down.
Yeah.
So you're tanking every record. There's a couple other things that changed, and immediately I was just like, what are we doing? Like, this is not, I did not feel like we selected the best of the fully qualified
Yeah.
in at the accuracy level that we should.
Yeah.
Like that, I feel like you have such a responsibility to those sailors who are entrusting us with that
And that's
process.
right. And that's what it's all about. I mean, you're
Yeah.
promoting people into leadership positions that need to be able to lead and need to be able to
Right.
lead aside from themselves.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's listen, I love my time as a chief and I wasn't always the best. I mean, I've told people I've made Master Chief too quick. I wish, listen, I don't mind the fact that I made it too quick, but,
Yeah.
I left the USS Mobile Bay in 1999 as a Frock Senior Chief, and I
Mm-hmm.
returned to sea 3 years later as a Command Master Chief.
Wow.
Um, and I struggled in my early CMC tours because I was
Mm-hmm.
never, I would have liked to have 2 more years in an afloat mess and then be a CMC. I didn't
Yeah.
know that
Yeah.
at the time. And that's one thing I appreciate the fact that since I made CMC, they've changed the program where they built that actually into the program now that you're going to have time in rate as a Master Chief before you
Really?
go. Yeah. So
Hmm.
when I made it, you could apply. It was a special request shit and a 1306 twice a year. That's how
Yeah.
you. There
Yeah.
was no CMC cop school, nothing like that. And since I went through
Yeah.
the SEA as an E8 as a senior chief, I changed my rate from ITCM to CMDCM 2 months after I made master
Yeah.
chief.
That's
So,
crazy.
but no, it's but whether it's my season in '96, like I said, the thing that I felt that it did for me is teach me humility
Mm-hmm.
and what it is to be a chief. But I also, and you're probably like this too, I, as a leader of just generally leading people, um, I kind of did do stuff because isn't that how it's done? And it wasn't probably till I
Yeah.
made senior chief that I started
Yeah.
seeing who's not making senior chief that I'm
Yeah.
realizing I guess it's not because so many people don't do it. And
Right.
then when you make Master Chief, it's even more.
Yep.
Um,
I I still marvel at the fact that I retired a Master Chief because I was a lot like I forget her name. You mentioned her earlier, the brutally honest Master Chief friend
oh,
that
Diane.
used,
Hmm.
yeah, Diane, that used as a sounding board. I've been that person my entire career, except I've probably been much less tactful about it, and like
Oh, I
I
doubt
don't
that.
always do it. I don't always close the door. I don't always, I got a lot better about that with time and maturity, but when I realized, confronting these people in certain venues probably isn't the move, but
Well, and
definitely very good.
I was just going to say one more thought about the season. I guess over the years, what I
Mm-hmm.
learned too, I never listen. These thoughts I never shared because you don't want to peel that make
Yeah,
people feel like every season is the best season because it's their season, right? They don't have a frame
yeah,
of reference like you and I do, but
right.
there's more I'm able to do to teach some of those hard lessons once they put on
Mm-hmm.
anchors. And that's what I would tell the mess. Hey, we're going
Yeah.
to go there. My goal is to make them come. I just want them to feel safe and comfortable to come to us to
Mm-hmm.
when they're wearing anchors to not reflect negatively on who we are as a community. And then
Mm-hmm.
these other things that we may be frustrated about, we'll work on that once they're in the mess.
Yeah, and that's why I love that NLIC came out with that CPO course as well, and
Yes.
that's why I was going to ask you about it when and if you were planning on doing it, because I do think that there's a lot of, especially if like senior chiefs, master chiefs, CMCs are the ones doing the teaching,
Yep.
because they're going to be a lot more receptive to that uh, source. But yeah, I think there's a lot that can be taught to those people after they make chief to prevent the types of reactions that you mentioned about like how your mentors are like, I can't believe there's chiefs that are treating you this way or doing this to you or whatever. Um, and
I,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
It's we even thought about one of our ideas for a seven course is in order to attend, you have to, because we've been asked by the wardroom, to bring in
to do like
JOs.
a JO one. Yeah.
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 So then I got thinking back when I said, number one job of chiefs, train your JO. What if we do a
Yeah.
course that you have to bring your JO with you? And it's just
That would
like
be cool.
a 1 or 2 day seminar. Again, respecting their time. We want to give you every reason to say yes. I don't want to give you a reason
Yeah.
to pause and say no.
Right.
Um, so if we do something like that, how might that impact people too, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's like, why do I do this? It's the emails and the phone calls or the texts that I get for the one person. It's that one person. It's like if you play golf, man, it's that one good stroke every round that gets you back for the next round. And there's times that I'm like, God, I am just exhausted. But then I get
Yeah.
a note. I'm
Yep.
like, this is why. This
Yep.
is why we can't stop, because there could be that one person out there that we
Yeah.
miss.
That's what keeps me going with this, man.
Yeah.
Like there's plenty of times and this is a good transition to my, like, kind of my last question.
Yeah. Yeah. We got to end soon.
Yeah, no, sorry. I know we've gone a little long here, but, is the reason I continue doing this, even right now, I'm kind of, I find myself not super motivated, and I've had a little bit of a hard time with the transition into retirement, as far as just like, I have a lot of medical issues, but a big part of it is quality of sleep, uh, for a lot of reasons. But it's like I just can't put it down, because like I get those types of emails, messages on social media. Like I've got stuff pinned up on my board over here where it's like, I got a chief saying you like changed my life and completely turned me around from being this bitter, jaded chief that just didn't think there was a point, was considering separating, to like being reinvigorated and like getting after it. And I'm just like,
Wow.
like getting an email like that is like, it blows my mind every time. Like I like, not that I don't, I've had that effect on like junior sailors, but to get it from
Up here.
chiefs and even people that I haven't directly interacted with, it's like, just they were receiving the podcast and that's it. Like I didn't even, the first interaction was them providing me that feedback, and it melts my brain every single time it happens. And it's why I continue doing it, because it's like, it's too important not to. I don't know how to stop, like, because I feel like I would be just neurotically like thinking about how people need this resource and I'm not providing it anymore, but I could. And yeah, they could drive me insane. But the kind of the last question I had for you was, and it's more for me personally, and like, I'm sure there's other people transitioning, but like, how was your transition out when you retired? Because I mean, you were around much longer than me. And I'm not having an issue so much with, like, mourning the loss of this thing that was like a big part of my identity or anything. It's more like the structure and the, like, having the mission that I felt was like, I have to do this every day. I'm having issues with the lack of structure, where I can like, I don't need to wake up, like, cause I'm not working right now. I'm going to start school in January, but I'm 100% disabled with the VA. So like, I have the financial flexibility to, just do whatever. And yeah, it's a little bizarre, and like, I'm having a hard time with the finding a purpose, which I thought would be the podcast, and I still think it will be eventually once I figure this out, but where I still feel that same like I have to do this. Like I do feel an obligation to do the podcast, and I still like doing it when I can get myself into this chair. As soon as we start talking, I love every second of it, but it's
Right.
I'm having an issue like making that the thing, I guess. And I'm wondering how your transition went, and any like lessons learned you can share about your retirement and adapting to post Navy life, and then we can wrap up.
Yeah. So, my retirement was not the normal. I mentioned
Okay.
I do work for a for-profit company, and the company I work for works directly supporting the military community. And so I transitioned in 3 weeks. I left one uniform, and 3 weeks later put on another uniform. That gives me structure. It keeps me connected with the
Yeah.
military community and maintaining a lot of relationships I had on active duty, both civilian and
Yeah.
military. So
Okay.
between what I get paid to do as well as what I volunteer to do with ELF,
Right.
um, I have a purpose, and
Mm.
more time is given to the for profit because they pay my bills, right? And I
Right.
love what I get to do. It's not a structured 9 to 5 job. The
Okay.
hours are somewhat flexible, but there could be a work that there could. I definitely work more than 40 hours a week, and I spend a lot
Okay.
of time on the road doing it.
Okay.
But the mission of why we do it, and I don't sell anything.
Yeah.
But and I could tell you offline who I'm talking about, but I
Yeah.
don't want to
I
make
was going
this
to
an
ask
advertisement.
after we,
But
after we finished.
the mission of the company is awesome. It really
Okay.
is. And I don't sell anything. I don't damage my reputation. They're
Mm-hmm.
supportive of the Enlisted Leadership Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps me get up. Where my transition was difficult is I did not learn to not be on. You talk about sleep. I still,
Yeah. Yeah.
what's the last thing you think about and what's the first thing you
Yep.
think about? And when you wake up in the middle of the night, what are you thinking about? And
Yep.
so sleep is always an issue. But I didn't learn, it was about 3 years out of my last 7 that I had to really start thinking about when are you going to let go? When are you going to
Mm-hmm.
enjoy and start turning it off? And is really when I learned that I may have said that I put my family first,
Yeah.
but I really wasn't. And even in retirement, I was still giving up my whatever. I just changed drugs, man. I went from my
Yeah.
Navy drug to this other company drug.
Yeah.
With elf as an appetizer to because you got to eat when you drink,
Yeah.
and it's so once my wife had a good conversation with me,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then I got some counseling. I've been doing some
Yep.
counseling even
That's exactly how
recently.
I ended up in
Yeah,
therapy, man.
yeah, and
My
it's
wife
been
was like, "You got to do
so
something about this."
yeah. But I've had to learn a lot and going to church and talking to. I run the military
Yeah.
ministry at our church now because there's a lot of men. I went through a group called Mighty Oaks,
Mm-hmm.
which is they have 4 different faith based week places that you can go for a week, and that was just so much. And I realized, just like anybody, we're not alone. There's nothing
Yeah.
unique that I'm going through, but it's having
Right.
that humility, that same humility that I could easily have on a ship or in the chief's mess.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
couldn't do at home. And I had to
Right.
learn that it's okay. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't change who I am. I still have my struggles. I'm not, certainly working through it, but the transition, I think that transition is always kind of hard.
Yeah.
And I saw an old dude yesterday wearing a blue, the cap with the blue hat with the chief anchor. And this guy
Yeah.
looked like he could have been at World War II. But I just
Ah,
lit up and I'm like, hey, brother, what's up, chief? It's like, because we have
yeah.
that, it just, because and even though I'm around it all the time, boy, it's just so cool to
Mm-hmm.
see that.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that, and you just punched out. So
Yeah.
it's going to take some time. Um,
Yeah.
and it's like I did not. I don't recommend anybody personally. I don't recommend people taking those 6 months off. Um,
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, take some time off, but I
Yeah.
think it's better to kind of ballast it out, right? And
Right.
just you don't need to shoot to the surface right away, and whatever you guys call it when you flop down like in
I
the
like the
movies.
sub reference. I like
Yeah,
it.
and
Yeah, I kind of went into it talking to my therapist about it. It was like going into it, taking some time off. But what I found was during the time off, it was I started to kind of beat myself up about being lazy. Like I was sleeping super late, and then my sleep schedule would get all whacked out, and then I'm not doing anything productive.
mhm.
Um, and so I'm trying to get a handle on that myself, but like absent of a structure that kind of forces me
Yeah,
to like I
like
have to
school.
show up to this thing.
Hmm.
So like I'm hoping when school starts, like I know I'll feel that type of an obligation to show up to class, which will provide me some structure generally, I think. And because I actually I had a job with a military contractor to develop training, and then the Navy like fumbled the ball preparing to award the contract, so they weren't ready. So then the job went away, and I was like, oh, all right. So then I kind of had a forced break because I couldn't just start school immediately. I had to wait until the next term starts.
Mm.
So I'll start January 3rd, but yeah, it was kind of weird. And I'm like, whatever. I wanted to take a break anyway, and then I find myself almost like, man, was this a good idea? Like a month, maybe, sure. But like it's effectively been since August 9th because I got surgery, was on convalescent leave, rolled right
Oh,
into terminal leave. And
jeez.
then, so I haven't really been doing anything like just
Yeah.
this and going to the gym. And sleeping too much and probably like watching a lot more Netflix than I should. But yeah, I don't know. I'm starting to think it might have been like, yeah, act like you're on PCS leave for 30
Yeah.
days and
Right.
then jump back in, like, cause I
But what
need
do you jump into? That's your question, right?
kind of like, I don't think it really matters for me so much. Like, cause like, I don't need the money of getting a job. It'd be nice. I would rather throw myself into this thing. I'm trying to kind of turn it into a business. But like I haven't had the results that I desired because I haven't been putting in the time that I thought I would, because I haven't been able to kind of like get myself ramped, like revved all the way up to commit all the time that I want to, and blah blah. Like, and it's funny because like I'll get in here and I'll be doing it and I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do, like, you're talking about this and I'm like, oh yeah, nonprofit sounds cool, maybe I should do that. And like, but then like to actually come back in here every day and treat it like a job, I don't know. I've just been having a hard time getting there. Like, self-imposed structure has been really difficult for me.
Sure.
So it's kind of like, I'm always curious to hear like how people have dealt with it.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
I know I didn't answer your question directly at all, but, um, I know for me, as far as balancing stuff out, I read a book called Atomic Habits.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it's one of the books we now give to foundry classes,
Yeah.
because it's about building those habits and
Yeah.
building that structure into an unstructured life.
Yeah.
And so simple things that work for me, like I've tried to do write on boards and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
ultimately I end up getting one of those remember the old wheel book kind of things. I got a little thing
Yeah.
like that has the
Mm-hmm.
dates and stuff that I put my daily tasks,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not an overwhelming, it's not an exhaustive list. So I look at it and get overwhelmed, but it's just
Yeah.
enough that, okay, for today, I want to make sure I accomplish these one or two things for ELF and these
Yeah.
things for and there's my structure. Um,
Yeah.
and, and, and when they don't happen, I've learned it's okay. If I got to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
because of, I had to go get my tooth fixed this week, that
Mm-hmm.
screwed up my schedule. So
Yep.
I was supposed to do something tonight and do something tomorrow. I
Mm-hmm.
never cancel on people, and I canceled both. It's like, I
Yeah.
just don't have the capacity. And I already rescheduled
Right.
with you. I wasn't going to cancel this.
Yeah.
Like, and it's okay. And you know what?
Yeah.
Both of those people, like, oh man, no problem. Thanks for letting me
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And but there's been a time that I'm like, I can't do that. I
Mm-hmm.
can't let people down. I gotta,
Yeah.
ah,
Yep. I
and
feel like shit every time I do it, man.
ah,
I beat myself up about it, and I've been doing it more since I've retired, where I'm like I'll sleep too late. Like, I was
yeah,
supposed to do something yesterday with so it was with Victoria because of the Patreon subscriptions. We do I do like a quarterly mentoring thing with
nice.
like via Zoom or whatever. And we were supposed to do it yesterday, and weird sleep schedule stuff, but I didn't set an alarm because I went to bed early and I hadn't slept much the night before. So I was like I'll be out, and but I went to bed so early. I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna wake up past like 10, like, and I woke up at like 3 in the afternoon,
Oh my
and I'm
God.
just like, how in the hell did this
Yeah.
happen? And I got a message from her going, well, are you okay? What happened? And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm an
Well, yeah,
infant. I'm a man infant.
I don't
Like,
have
I
that
just
problem.
like, yeah. But part of it
Mm.
is the sleep issue.
Yes.
I'm still trying to figure that out. Like, I'm
See,
sleeping better than cause I like had anxiety issues and then sleep
sure.
apnea really bad. And then
Oh
it's a
gosh,
bunch of other shit
I'm
that it
sorry.
just, yeah, I'm a dumpster fire, but I'm working on it. It's a lot better than it was. So
Good,
it's trending the right direction. Um,
good.
but yeah, I gotta get way better about it, but I feel horrible when I do that. Even like I canceled on my chiropractor like twice yesterday. Like, I
Uh,
moved it to later in the afternoon, and
and they
then I
got
still
canceled here.
didn't. I still didn't get there. But anyway, well, thanks, man. This was awesome. I'm definitely gonna have a lot more questions for you, particularly about the nonprofit stuff, because I've always kind of envisioned like where I'm at locally, and we can talk offline
Yeah.
specifically, but there's
Mhm.
a warship memorial that I've always thought to myself would be really cool to do, like a heritage academy or like a
Yeah.
leadership academy of some kind, working with them, and it would probably raise money for them too. And um yeah, like doing kind of something similar on a smaller scale, most likely. But then now I've always been very interested too in like an online curriculum of some kind, whether that's for profit or not, I don't know. But I lean towards nonprofit because of who I'd be targeting. But yeah, man, I think what you guys are doing is incredible, and I hope that more people become aware of it.
Well, more
when we blast this out there.
That listens to your podcast, right?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. There, you should get hopefully a little boost. The audience, I think, will. I like if they're looking for people like me, they're looking for people like you, for sure. And I think a lot, especially the people that are lucky enough to be local, like in the San Diego area.
Well, but in Zoom, you don't have
advantage.
To be. That's
true. Nice. Yeah, true. Now that you guys are doing, which I didn't know you guys did stuff online.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. But I appreciate your time, man.
Thank you, brother. And
all right, I hope you all enjoyed that. I had a great time talking to Dave. It was very fun because I saw a lot of myself in him. Specifically, kind of like his drive to do what he's doing and how important he feels that it is, and that he's still doing it. I don't know. It was very cool that. He's been able to accomplish what he has, and obviously with a ton of help from awesome people. But yeah, I think that what they're doing is, I mean, there should be one in every fleet concentration area. I think, and I asked him that towards the end of the podcast. I'm like, why doesn't the Navy just cut you a check and like you can just fix this problem? Because he could. He would probably need to make it his full-time job, but the Navy can afford that, so let's go. But I think it's a big deal what he's doing. I think it's a very positive and important contribution to leadership development and education in the Navy. And I really do. I wish it would proliferate. I feel like the Department of the Navy needs to get on the ball and cut a check. But yeah, if you're in that area, take advantage of it. If you're not in the area and you can find the time to get away, see if you can get your command to fund you going on the travel. But I highly recommend being involved in even if it's via the Zoom version, be involved and take advantage of that resource, because it's very cool and it's meaningful, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. With that, as always, if you need anything from us, hit us up. Don't Give Up the Ship Podcast at gmail.com. You can Facebook message us at Don't Give Up the Ship Podcast. Or you can DM us on Instagram or Reddit or Discord at dgutspodcast. Hit us up. Lots of ways to do it. And like I mentioned on the Spin the Yarn last week, if you want to be a contributor, I'm open to it. Hit us up. Shoot me an email. That's the best way if you're going to get into that, because, long form conversation via email is a lot easier than me typing on my phone, because I'm old and, barely fluent in most technologies. So especially video. So that's where we're at. But yeah, really appreciate it. If you want to support us, go to dgutspodcast.com. There's a donate button on the website, or you can go to Don't Go Up Ship Apparel, dgutspodcast.com. Get yourself some Naval Pride and Heritage gear you'll actually wear in public. It's pretty awesome. I highly recommend it. I have no selfish motivations for that whatsoever, obviously. And then, if you want to support us financially, you can do that. We'll get a bunch of cool benefits for it by going to patreon.com/dgutspodcast. Really appreciate you. If you're able to do that, please do. Shout out to Victoria and William and all the other dope patrons that we have. I would love to have more. So go to patreon.com/dgutspodcast and become a patron today. Really appreciate it. It means a lot and it helps a lot. And with that, that's what I got for you today. Thank you so much for listening, and don't give up the ship. Hey, shout out to the patrons out there that are supporting the podcast platform via our Patreon. I really appreciate all of you. Victoria Livingood and William McIver are level 5s, which is still insane to me that you saints are willing to support us on that level and in that way. 2 level 2s, we got Ariana. And we got Greg, and then we got Seth and Ryan at level 1. You're all amazing. I appreciate all of you, and you're enabling not only for us to not be supporting this out of pocket, but also for us to expand into areas we've always wanted to, because now we have the funds to do it. So I really appreciate all of you. If you want to support us in that way, please go to patreon.com/dgutspodcast and become a patron today. Please hit the like button, drop a comment down below on what you thought, and subscribe to the channel.